Iranian rapper Amir Hossein Maqsoodloo, also known as Tataloo, has been executed after a death sentence was upheld by Iran's Supreme Court. The 37-year-old musician faced charges of insulting Islamic sanctities and had previously challenged Iran's theocracy through his music. Activists have decried his execution and expressed concern for his safety after he attempted to kill himself in prison. Donald Trump exchanged phone messages with Jeffrey Epstein in 2004 and again in 2005 when Palm Beach police searched his mansion. The messages were discovered among Epstein's belongings during the investigation into a sex abuse claim made by a minor. Despite Musk's tweet suggesting Trump may be connected to unreleased Epstein documents, there is no evidence of wrongdoing from Trump. A cargo ship carrying 3,000 cars, including 750 electric vehicles with lithium-ion batteries, caught fire in the Pacific Ocean on Tuesday and was abandoned by its crew. The blaze is still burning, and a nearby vessel rescued all 22 sailors on board. Zodiac Maritime has appointed a salvage company to respond to the ongoing fire, and the U.S. Coast Guard is monitoring the situation. The incident highlights the challenges of extinguishing fires caused by lithium-ion batteries, which can short-circuit and ignite extremely hot fires. As smartphones continue to dominate our lives, experts recommend taking steps to mitigate their impact on mental health. Try using apps like StepIn that encourage mindful phone use, or adopt smartphone-free days to reduce stress and anxiety. Additionally, consider incorporating flavonoid-rich foods, practicing deep breathing exercises, and following a healthy diet to support overall well-being. By implementing these simple yet effective strategies, individuals can take control of their mental health and cultivate a healthier relationship with technology. Financial expert Dave Ramsey advises nearly 60% of retired Americans who rely on Social Security as their primary source of income, which often replaces only 40% of pre-retirement earnings, are facing dire retirement prospects. To create a safety net for golden years, Ramsey recommends setting a saving benchmark of 15% of gross income, maxing out tax-advantaged accounts like 401ks and Roth IRAs, and going beyond the bare minimum to add passive income sources such as rental property. With these steps, individuals can potentially accumulate enough savings to afford a truly secure retirement. American Airlines sent a Boeing 787-9 to Naples, Italy, but diverted the plane to Rome due to operational limitations because it was too big for Naples International Airport. Passengers were bused to Naples instead. U.S. President Trump says a decision on the next Federal Reserve chair is imminent, with former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh considered a frontrunner. The president has expressed support for lowering interest rates and criticized current Chairman Jerome Powell's slow pace in cutting borrowing costs. Terry Moran, a senior national correspondent at ABC News, has been suspended pending further evaluation after posting a late-night X post on Sunday, calling Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, a world-class hater. The 12:06 a.m. post was flagged by the White House and sparked an apology demand from Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Moran had sat down with President Trump for an Oval Office interview in April to mark his first 100 days in office, but their meeting reportedly got testy as Moran pressed Trump on his claims about a photo of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. In a late-night crackdown, St. Louis police responded to reports of reckless driving and used spike struts to stop dozens of fleeing vehicles, with no immediate arrests or injuries reported. A Chinese fishing vessel ran aground off a Philippines-occupied island in the disputed South China Sea, prompting Filipino forces to go on alert. The ship was extricated by other Chinese vessels, but no details on injuries or damage are available. An American Airlines Boeing 737-823 aircraft caught fire while taxiing in Denver after engine vibrations were reported, injuring 12 passengers. The National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) report found fuel leaks and improperly installed parts caused the engine failure, but a reason for the fire remains unknown. A study by Environmental Science and Technology reveals that neonicotinoid pesticides, commonly used in agriculture, are negatively impacting honeybee health by slowing their ability to forage for pollen, which is crucial for brood development. The U.S. could lose up to 16 to 70% of its commercial honeybee colonies by 2025, threatening global food production and ecosystems. However, researchers and experts recommend strategies like using less toxic pesticides, supporting pollinator-friendly gardens, and reducing pesticide use in agriculture to combat the issue. In 2025, a record 4.2 million Americans are forecast to turn 65, marking a historic demographic shift that will reshape money conversations and financial planning. As the baby boomer generation passes on wealth, families must discuss essential financial conversations to manage assets and expectations, with the goal of protecting family wealth for future generations. While intermittent fasting may offer benefits like weight loss and improved metabolic health, experts warn that it can also mask disordered eating behaviors in individuals with body image issues or psychological distress around food. As many as 28.8 million people in the U.S. will have an eating disorder in their lifetimes, and intermittent fasting's restrictive nature can inadvertently lead to development of eating disorders, especially for those with genetic, environmental, or mental health vulnerabilities. The next round of Social Security payments will be sent out this month, with the first payment wave starting on the second Wednesday of June. The payment schedule depends on birth date, but there are exceptions for those receiving benefits since before May 1997. Paper checks are set to be phased out by September 30th as the SSA shifts to digital payments. At least 101 dogs were found living in poor conditions at a Raleigh, North Carolina home. Many had skin and dental issues, and some were taken to shelters for medical assessments. Russia launched a thunderous aerial assault on Ukraine overnight, dealing a blow to hopes of a peace deal between the warring sides, just days after a drone attack on Russian military airfields. Despite repeated calls to 911 from concerned residents, Cleveland police took hours to respond to a massive party that spilled into the streets in Mayfield Heights, prompting a heated confrontation between a councilman and safety director. The incident highlights ongoing issues of short staffing and inadequate response times within the department. A Ukrainian drone attack damaged around 10% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, including Tu-95 and Tu-22 aircraft, according to German Major General Christian Freuding. The U.S. estimates that up to 20 Russian warplanes were destroyed in the attack. Moscow will need to ramp up security measures after a successful operation showed that its vast territory is no longer safe for military assets. Archaeologists in England have found evidence of a 1,200-year-old public punishment along the River Thames, revealing signs of violent death and dietary distress suffered by a woman who was beaten to death. The remains of UPT-90 SK-1278 were discovered in 1991 and underwent full bioarchaeological analysis. Researchers found traumatic injuries, blunt force trauma, and a bilateral scapular fracture, indicating a particularly gruesome death, likely due to the nebulous laws surrounding crime and punishment during medieval times. U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has vowed to tackle America's expanding waistlines, particularly in the wake of a report linking ultra-processed foods to increased risk of obesity, heart disease, and cancer. His efforts have been met with both praise and criticism from the food industry, which he is accusing of prioritizing profits over public health. Despite some concerns about his credibility, Kennedy's crusade has won over local voters in Holmes County, Mississippi, one of the most obese states in the country. The first task for Kennedy will be gaining influence over the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, to reformulate unhealthy foods out of the program. The S&P 500 is roughly 2% away from a fresh all-time high, driven by a broad-based rally following the May jobs report. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey and updates on consumer and wholesale inflation will headline the week ahead. Economists expect the Consumer Price Index to show price increases accelerated amid tariff uncertainty, with headline inflation expected to rise 2.5% annually in May. A new COVID-19 variant, NB1.8.1, has emerged in the U.S., with recent surveillance data showing a 10% increase in prevalence from last month. Despite initial concerns, infectious disease specialists say there are no glaring differences between symptoms of NB1.8.1 and other variants, but research suggests it may be more transmissible due to new mutations on the spike protein. Vaccines are expected to hold up well, but effectiveness against infection is limited and transient. High-risk individuals are advised to stay vaccinated. The Trump administration will start garnishing up to 15% of Social Security benefits for delinquent federal student loan borrowers this summer. However, two legal solutions exist that can help most retirees avoid the garnishment: applying for total and permanent disability discharge, or requesting a financial hardship exemption from the Department of Education. A Utah state judge has ruled that a convicted killer with dementia, Ralph Leroy Menzies, is competent enough to face execution, despite concerns from his lawyers. Menzies was sentenced to death in 1988 for killing a Utah mother of 3, and had previously selected a firing squad as his method of execution. His lawyers plan to appeal the ruling to the state Supreme Court, arguing that Menzies' dementia renders him incapable of understanding the nature of his punishment. Researchers have found evidence of extensive poaching of Asian small-clawed otters in Japan, driven by their popularity in otter cafes. DNA analysis reveals that 94% of otters kept in cafes originated from Thailand, threatening the species' survival and population viability. Conservation efforts, such as donating to organizations or supporting habitat preservation, can help mitigate this problem. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory captured a powerful X-1 class solar flare from the sunspot AR3186, posing a radiation threat to Earth. The eruption occurred on date and was observed in multiple wavelengths. Astronomers warn of potential radiation effects on electronic systems and space travel. Automaker Porsche denies plans to shift final assembly of cars to the U.S., following a Bloomberg report citing its CEO, Oliver Bloom. The company faces challenges including falling demand and tariffs on imported vehicles. A new master plan for Montreal Trudeau International Airport severely reduces green space, sparking criticism from conservationists and locals who argue it will harm endangered species. The reduced green space is expected to be 10% of the planned amount, prompting concerns about environmental impact and corporate greenwashing. Conservation groups are fighting to preserve existing green spaces and re-establish new ones around the airport. Experts say green spaces provide crucial health and economic benefits in urban settings, but the plan's reductions may ultimately save money by implementing solar panels and cleaner fuels for aircraft. In an interview on The Joe Rogan Experience, FBI Director Kash Patel alleged that former FBI Director Andrew McCabe and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein were involved in a disinformation campaign and committed illegal activity. Patel claimed he had uncovered evidence of a conspiracy, but emphasized that prosecution would be handled by the DOJ. His comments have sparked concerns about government corruption and raised questions about the limits of his investigation. The U.S. Supreme Court will consider making it harder for intellectually disabled individuals to show their lives can't be spared due to mental disability. In a case from Alabama seeking to execute Joseph Clifton Smith, sentenced to death for killing a man in 1997. In NYC's Borough Park, landlord Anayelo De Juda is trying to evict tenant Kenyatta Blakely from his first-floor unit, due to a lack of lighting and ventilation. However, the Department of Buildings has issued a vacate order on the unit, citing code violations. Blakely claims he can't pay rent due to the hazardous conditions, while DeJudit denies any wrongdoing and claims Blakely owes back rent. The standoff raises questions about housing rights, Kelfmeads, and who gets to decide who stays and goes in such situations. A recent report from Fidelity reveals that most people aren't saving enough for retirement, with average 401k and IRA balances varying significantly across generations. Baby boomers have an average balance of $249,300, while Gen Xers have $192,300. Millennials have $67,300, and Gen Z has just $13,500. The report suggests that stability, consistency, and compound growth are key to building a solid retirement nest egg, rather than trying to time the market or following trendy investment strategies. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday his relationship with billionaire Elon Musk is over, amid a public feud between the two. Trump warned of serious consequences if Musk funds U.S. Democrats running against Republicans who back the president's tax and spending bill. According to cardiologists, blueberries can help reduce LDL cholesterol levels due to their high antioxidant content and fiber. Regular consumption of blueberries has been shown to improve cardiovascular outcomes, lower bad cholesterol, and promote vascular health. Adding blueberries to breakfast may be particularly beneficial as it pairs well with other heart-healthy foods and helps slow down the absorption of sugar, reducing the risk of rapid spikes in blood glucose. At least 10 Ukrainian drones were shot down near Moscow overnight, with Russian forces continuing their long-range strikes into Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Western partners to provide concrete air defense systems to help counter Russia's intensifying missile and drone attacks on cities nationwide. Russia's Wagner Group is leaving Mali after 3.5 years, but Russia will maintain a mercenary presence in the country through its Africa Corps paramilitary force. The move comes as Western influence wanes and Mali battles an insurgency fought by armed groups. Experts say the decision could shift Russia's focus from fighting alongside the Malian army to training and providing equipment. At Apple's annual Worldwide Developer Conference WWDC starting Monday, the company will outline new capabilities for its current devices that lay the foundation for where it could be going next. But with rivals like Google and Samsung already moving ahead in the AI space, can Apple prove its worth? The stakes are high as the company struggles to convince consumers and Wall Street that it's a leader in artificial intelligence. A recent study found that 18 captive-bred axolotls released into restored natural wetlands in southern Mexico City are hunting, eating, and avoiding predators, thriving and gaining weight. The discovery offers hope for protecting these critically endangered creatures and their habitats, and could lead to breakthroughs in human health research. California state lawmakers have advanced several proposals aimed at reining in utility profits and slashing electricity bills, including a bill that would require utilities to share costs of fighting wildfires and building new transmission infrastructure. The measures are part of the state's agenda to tackle high living costs, which rose 47% between 2019 and 2023. Supporters say the goals are to make investor-owned utilities start sharing some of the costs without offending anyone. Ethereum's price could reach $166,000 by 2032, according to Cathie Wood, but experts question the feasibility of this estimate amid competition from newer blockchains and macroeconomic headwinds. The cryptocurrency has lost over 30% of its value in the past year, but some investors remain bullish on its future. Jeopardy host Ken Jennings writes in a new op-ed that misinformation, like Kristi Noem's incorrect definition of habeas corpus, threatens American democracy. Jennings argues that fact-based decision-making and critical thinking can be salvaged through activities like trivia games, which he believes ultimately save the republic. Thousands of protesters marched through Rome on Saturday, calling for Italy's government to condemn the Israeli war in Gaza, with organizers claiming up to 300,000 people participated. The demonstration, organized by Italy's center-left Democratic Party, comes as Israel faces mounting international criticism for its military campaign and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. 8 deportees and 13 ICE officers are stranded at a U.S. naval base in Djibouti after a judge blocked their deportation flight. The officers are suffering from respiratory infections, heat exhaustion, and cramped living conditions due to poor sanitation. Several Las Vegas casinos have laid off workers, including table game dealers, due to a slowdown in tourism, with experts attributing the decline to rising travel costs, fewer international visitors, and economic uncertainty. The city's unemployment rate has risen to 5.9%, with many properties transitioning to automated systems and tightening budgets amid weaker earnings reports. Mortgage rates have increased significantly, with the national average for a 30-year fixed mortgage reaching 6.85%, while a 15-year fixed rate stands at 6.16%. Zillow forecasts these rates to remain stable until September, unless a sudden economic shock occurs. For retirees in good health with a long life expectancy, drawing down their 401k first to delay Social Security benefits can maximize guaranteed inflation-adjusted income. However, this strategy may not be suitable for those with health issues or smaller retirement savings, who should consider taking Social Security early for immediate income needs. According to doctors specializing in longevity, making small changes to your daily habits can add up to a longer life expectancy. Try incorporating short walks, eating breakfast, working in colorful plants, snacking on nuts, keeping your bedroom cool, and socializing with loved ones into your routine. Grant Hardin, a former police chief and convicted killer known as the Devil in the Ozarks, has been recaptured after a 2-week manhunt in northern Arkansas. He impersonated a corrections officer to escape from prison last month and was tracked down by law enforcement officers using bloodhounds, drones, and helicopters before being apprehended near Moccasin Creek. Senior fellow at Peterson Institute for International Economics, Mary Lovely, predicts U.S.-China trade talks will resume on Monday in London. The resumption comes as tensions remain high following the Trump tariffs and their potential impact on the labor market if negotiations fail. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett says the White House is open to discussing Medicare waste and abuse if the Senate finds evidence of it, but emphasizes that Medicare is not currently on the table. Hassett also discusses ongoing trade negotiations with China, including a meeting in London where Treasury Secretary Bessent and trade officials will discuss tariffs and exports of critical minerals. Additionally, Hassett notes that President Trump supports changing the state and local tax deduction, but emphasizes the need for a bill to pass on the 4th of July, despite Senate opposition. An American Airlines Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner flight from Philadelphia to Naples was diverted to Rome due to operational limitations, forcing passengers to take a bus for the remaining 3-hour journey. Senator Amy Klobuchar joined CBS News' Margaret Bryan to discuss economic concerns with White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett and Save the Children CEO Jonty Saripto. The three experts talked about topics such as trade policies, education funding, and international aid. Their conversation covered various aspects of economic challenges facing the United States and globally. 3 chefs, including a Michelin-starred chef and a trailblazing NFL cheerleader turned restaurant owner, received the James Beard Award for their culinary achievements. Kilmer Abrego Garcia, deported to El Salvador in error, has returned to the U.S. to face criminal charges. Representative Jason Crow criticizes President Trump's planned military parade as a vanity parade. The incident raises concerns about immigration policies and accountability. Save the Children's CEO, Janti Sorripto, says no aid has reached Gaza since March 2nd due to Israel's refusal to allow entry and concerns over a new organization, despite the blockade being formally lifted. The U.S. National Guard has arrived in downtown Los Angeles amid escalating tensions over President Trump's immigration enforcement operations, with multiple federal law enforcement officers injured and at least 29 protesters arrested. The deployment comes after days of violent clashes between protesters and law enforcement, with ICE officials confirming at least 118 allegedly unauthorized immigrants have been arrested. The California National Guard is expected to deploy approximately 2,000 troops, who will not be involved in immigration enforcement efforts, but will assist with perimeter protection. Senator Amy Klobuchar says Democrats can't be the party of the status quo, as she criticizes President Trump's immigration policies, calling them inflammatory and morally bereft. She advises Governor Newsom to focus on local law enforcement and due process, rather than federalizing the National Guard. Klobuchar also warns that Trump's policies are putting Democrats on the back foot, despite being broadly supported by Americans, particularly when it comes to deporting violent criminals. She argues that Democrats need to move forward with a new energy and agenda, holding Republicans accountable for their actions and working on issues that affect everyday people. Rep. Tony Gonzalez, R. Texas, says LA protests are the tip of the iceberg amid escalating deportations, with 100,000 people already deployed or deported. Gonzalez calls for focusing on convicted criminal illegal aliens, but criticizes President Biden's approach, saying it prioritizes speed over process and puts Americans at risk. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem promises to prevent Los Angeles riots from repeating the violence seen in 2020, as federalized National Guard troops are deployed to secure critical infrastructure. The move comes amid allegations of poor governance and inadequate response by local authorities, with protesters claiming that undocumented immigrants were held in makeshift facilities without adequate access to food and water. The Senate is investigating President Trump's bill, which may lead to scrutiny of Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse. White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett acknowledged seeing massive waste in Medicaid, but says his team would examine Medicare if issues are found by the Senate. Senator Amy Klobuchar says her party must adapt to defeat Trump administration, as a CBS News poll finds 71% of Democrats think their leaders are ineffective. U.S. Rep. Tony Gonzalez warns that protests in Los Angeles are a precursor to nationwide deportations under the Trump administration's escalating efforts, citing cities across the country. Gaza's humanitarian crisis worsens as Israeli blockade causes malnutrition rates to triple, and Save the Children's CEO, Janti Sorripto, says U.S. efforts are ineffective and inadequate, threatening mass starvation among innocent civilians, particularly children. The FDA has issued its highest-level recall of a large egg supplier, the August Egg Company, due to a salmonella outbreak affecting dozens of people in 7 states. At least 79 people have been infected, and 21 are hospitalized. Recalled eggs were distributed between February and May and come from the following plant codes: P6562 or CA5330. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem warns against a repeat of 2020's unrest in Minneapolis, amid President Trump's call for National Guard deployment in Los Angeles. President Trump urged the National Guard to enforce order in Los Angeles as protests over ICE activity unfolded, echoing Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's response to George Floyd's killing in 2020. Chaos erupted in the Los Angeles area as protests broke out amid increased activity by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, across the country, prompting concerns about the treatment of migrants. Former Librarian of Congress Carla Hayden speaks out publicly for the first time since her firing by President Trump, discussing libraries' role in democracy and the importance of freedom to read. Hayden joins. Without insurance coverage, women are facing increasingly high costs for egg freezing, with prices ranging from $15,000 to over $30,000, according to a new website that tracks fertility clinic fees. Jennifer Lannon, co-founder of Freeze.Health, notes that these costs can be prohibitive for many women, making it difficult to access this reproductive option. Former Library of Congress librarian Carla Hayden was recently fired by President Trump, and in an exclusive interview with CBS News' Robert Costa, she shares her thoughts on the experience. Hayden joins other notable guests, including William Shakespeare enthusiasts, musical legends, and theater performers, in a diverse range of segments exploring art, culture, and entertainment. Police release last known images of Jermaine Charlo, a 23-year-old missing mom, in hopes of finding clues about her disappearance. CBS News contributor Michelle Miller reports. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announces Trump administration's nationwide roundups of individuals potentially in the country illegally as protests erupt in Southern California. Kilmer Abrego Garcia, lead singer of the Texas-based band Turnpike Troubadours, has been returned to the U.S. to face criminal charges stemming from a 2020 arrest. The 38-year-old musician was initially released on bail, but later rearrested. He will now be extradited back to the country to answer to charges related to his involvement in a fight that left one person injured. Garcia's music career has been overshadowed by personal issues, including arrests and run-ins with the law. Environmental activist Greta Thunberg and actor Liam Cunningham are among activists on a boat heading to the Gaza Strip, which Israel vows to block from reaching its shores. The boat's crew claims it aims to break Israel's naval blockade, but the country has warned of severe consequences for those attempting to breach it. Protests erupted in Los Angeles after dozens of immigrants were arrested in citywide immigration and customs enforcement operations, prompting President Trump's deployment of at least 2,000 National Guard troops. Activists called for mass mobilization against the raids, which included searches at a clothing warehouse and federal buildings, sparking clashes with law enforcement. The Los Angeles County Sheriff warned that non-lethal munitions were fired by federal agents before deputies arrived at the scene, while local officials expressed concern over the deployment of National Guard troops without their approval. On June 8th, historical events such as the 1967 Arab-Israeli War's start, the 1972 Munich Olympics opening, and the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing took place. The U.S. Congress voted to extend the draft for the Vietnam War in 1971. This date has seen significant global conflicts and tragic incidents. A new survey finds that a slight majority of Americans believe President Trump's deportation program focuses on deporting dangerous criminals, while also seeing it as a means to make the U.S. safer. However, opinions on the effectiveness of the program and its economic impact are more divided, with some Americans disapproving of the program due to concerns about process and potential economic harm. The survey also reveals that Trump's approval rating on immigration remains high among Republicans, while Democrats express doubts about their ability to challenge his policies. The 78th Annual Tony Awards, honoring the best in plays and musicals on Broadway, will take place on June 8th at New York City's Radio City Music Hall. The ceremony marks the end of a record-breaking season with $2 billion in gross ticket sales and 14.7 million audience members. 15 musicals and 14 plays are nominated across 26 competitive categories. U.S. President Donald Trump has deployed 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles in response to large-scale protests over immigration and customs enforcement (ICE) raids, which resulted in dozens of arrests on Friday. The deployment is part of a Title X authority order, allowing the president to deploy troops without Governor Gavin Newsom's approval. Protests continued on Saturday, with demonstrators clashing with law enforcement and setting fires. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has criticized the federal government's actions, saying they sow terror in our communities. In 1996, Danny Houchin's body was found in a Montana river. The sheriff initially said she drowned, but DNA evidence eventually led to her killer being identified after decades of fighting for justice from her family.